Nara floated through the metal corridors of the space station like a dancer. Her long, thin arms pushed gently against the walls as she moved. The Velkari people were built for this kind of work. Their bodies were tall and graceful, perfect for moving in space where there was no gravity to pull them down. She loved working here, high above her home planet. Through the big windows, she could see the blue and green world spinning slowly below. The space station was huge, bigger than most cities. Thousands of workers from her species lived here, building ships and machines that would travel to distant stars. Nara was only 25 years old, but she was already one of the best engineers on the station. She understood how the quantum drives worked better than people twice her age. These drives were what made their spaceships go faster than light. They were dangerous and complex, but Nara could fix problems that left other engineers scratching their heads. Today felt like any other day. Nara woke up in her small room on the station and ate her morning meal. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. Her reflection showed a typical Velkari woman with pale skin, large eyes, and the forearms that made her people such good builders. She tied her dark hair back and put on her work clothes. "Good morning, Nara," said Jinwoo as she entered the work area. He was her boyfriend and worked as an engineer too. His smile made her heart feel warm. They had been together for 2 years now, and Nara thought they might get married soon. "Morning," she replied, giving him a quick kiss. "What are we working on today?" "The quantum drive in Section 7 is acting strange," Jinwoo explained. "The energy readings are jumping around. The computer says everything is fine, but the workers are worried." Nara nodded. She trusted the workers more than the computers. People who worked with machines every day could feel when something was wrong, even if the numbers looked good. The team gathered around a table covered with papers and computer screens. There were 6 of them working together: Nara, Jinwoo, and 4 other engineers. They all looked at the readings from the quantum drive. "See here," said Hyun, pointing at a graph on the screen. "The power goes up and down every few minutes. That should not happen." "Maybe the containment field is getting weak," suggested Ara, another engineer. "If the field breaks, the quantum energy could leak out." Nara studied the numbers carefully. Something was definitely wrong, but she could not figure out what it was. The quantum drive created enormous amounts of energy by bending space and time. If something went wrong with it, the results would be very bad. "We need to check it in person," Nara said finally. "The computers might be missing something," the others agreed. They put on their spacesuits and grabbed their tools. The walk to Section 7 took 20 minutes through the station's long corridors. Other workers waved at them as they passed. Everyone knew Nara's team. They were the ones who got called when the really hard problems happened. Section 7 was in the heart of the space station. The quantum drive sat in the middle of a large room, surrounded by thick walls and protective shields. It looked like a giant metal ball covered with pipes and wires. Blue light glowed from inside it, showing that the quantum field was active. "The energy field looks normal from here," said Mina, one of the younger engineers on the team. Nara was not so sure. She moved closer to the drive, her instruments beeping as they measured the energy levels. The readings were strange. The quantum field was stable, but there were small cracks forming in the containment system. "Everyone stay back," she warned. "I think the containment wall is breaking down." As soon as she said it, alarms started going off throughout the section. Red lights flashed on the walls and a computer voice began speaking. "Warning. Quantum containment failure detected. All workers evacuate immediately." But Nara could see that it was too late for some of them. Hyun and Ara were standing right next to a control panel that was connected directly to the quantum drive. If the containment field collapsed completely, they would be hit by a wave of deadly radiation. Without thinking, Nara pushed herself forward through the zero gravity. She used her forearms to grab both Hyun and Ara, pulling them away from the dangerous area. At the same time, she shouted to the others, "Get out! Get out now!" Jinwoo tried to reach for her, but she pushed him toward the exit. "Go, I'll be right behind you." The quantum drive made a sound like thunder. The blue glow became brighter and brighter. Nara could feel the energy building up, ready to explode outward. She managed to push 2 more workers to safety, but there was no time left for her to escape. The containment field finally broke. A wave of quantum radiation burst out from the drive, moving at the speed of light. Nara felt it hit her like a wall of fire. The energy passed through her body, burning her nerves and damaging her cells in ways that normal fire could not. She screamed, but no sound came out in the empty space. The radiation was invisible, but she could feel it destroying her from the inside. Her legs went numb first. Then the feeling spread up through her body. She tried to move, but her lower body would not respond. The emergency systems finally kicked in. Thick metal shields slammed down around the quantum drive, containing what was left of the radiation leak. The alarms kept ringing as rescue workers rushed into the section. Jinwoo was the first one to reach her. His face was white with fear behind his helmet. Nara, can you hear me?" She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. "I can't feel my legs." The medical team arrived quickly. They put her on a stretcher and rushed her to the station's hospital. As they carried her through the corridors, Nara looked up at the ceiling lights passing overhead. She tried to move her toes, but nothing happened. She tried to move her legs, but they felt like they belonged to someone else. Dr. Yuna met them at the hospital. She was the best doctor on the station, known for saving people from even the worst accidents. But when she looked at the medical scanner results, her face became serious. "The quantum radiation has damaged her spinal cord," she told Jinwoo quietly. "The nerves that control her legs are badly hurt. But you can fix it, right?" Jinwoo asked. "The Velkari have the best medicine in the galaxy. You can heal anything." Dr. Yuna shook her head slowly. "This is different. Quantum radiation does not damage the body like normal radiation. It changes the basic structure of the cells. Our healing technology cannot fix this kind of damage." Over the next few days, other doctors came to look at Nara. They ran many tests and tried different treatments. Some of the best medical minds in Velkari space studied her case, but the answer was always the same. The damage could not be repaired. Nara lay in her hospital bed, staring at her legs. They looked normal, but she could not feel them or make them move. The doctor said she would never walk again, never fly through space like she used to. For a Velkari, this was like losing part of their soul. The news spread throughout the space station and down to the planet below. Nara had saved 6 lives by throwing herself into danger. She was called a hero. People sent her messages and gifts. The government gave her awards and money, but none of that mattered to her. All she wanted was to feel her legs again, to push off from the walls and float through the corridors like she had done every day of her adult life. That life was over now. She would have to learn to live in a completely different way. When she was finally released from the hospital, they gave her a mobility chair that could float through the station's zero-gravity areas. It worked well enough, but it was not the same as moving with her own body. She felt like she was trapped inside a machine. Jinwoo tried to be supportive, but Nara could see the sadness in his eyes. Their plans for the future had changed in an instant. Everything they had dreamed about doing together would have to be different now. "We will figure this out," he promised her. "Maybe the doctors will find a cure. Maybe there is some treatment they have not tried yet." Nara wanted to believe him, but she had heard what Dr. Yuna said. The quantum radiation had changed her body in ways that Velkari medicine could not fix. She was going to spend the rest of her life in a chair, watching other people do the things she used to love. As she looked out the window at her home planet far below, Nara made a decision. She would not give up hope completely, but she would not wait for miracles either. She would have to find a new way to live, even if that life was nothing like the one she had planned. 10 years had passed since the accident. Nara lived alone now in a small apartment in the lower part of the city. Her home was on one of the bottom floors of a tall building, where people who could not fly very well usually lived. She had not been up to the higher levels in years. Every morning she woke up and moved from her bed to her mobility chair. The chair was much better now than the first one the hospital had given her. It could move smoothly through her apartment and even go outside when she needed to buy food or supplies. But she rarely left her home anymore. Her job kept her busy. She worked as a quantum systems analyst, which meant she studied the energy patterns from spaceships and stations all across the galaxy. She was very good at this work because she understood quantum systems better than almost anyone. Companies paid her well to solve their hardest problems. The best part of her job was that she could do it from her apartment. She had 3 large computer screens set up on her desk, and she could connect to quantum drives anywhere in the galaxy. She would study their energy patterns and tell the engineers how to fix problems or make improvements. Her clients did not know she was disabled. They only knew her as a brilliant analyst who could solve problems that stumped other experts. She preferred it that way. When people found out about her condition, they always looked at her differently. They saw her as someone to pity instead of someone to respect. Jinwoo still visited sometimes, but not very often. He had tried to stay with her for the first 2 years after the accident. He brought her food and helped her with daily tasks. He told her he loved her and that her disability did not matter to him, but Nara could see that it did matter. When he looked at her, she saw sadness in his eyes. When other Velkari flew past her windows, laughing and playing in the air, Jinwoo would quickly look away. He missed the person she used to be, even if he would not admit it. Eventually, she told him to leave. "You deserve someone who can fly with you," she said. "Someone who can give you the life you want." "I want to be with you," he insisted. "We can make this work," but Nara knew better. She had seen how he watched the other Velkari couples floating together outside her window. She had noticed how he talked less and smiled less as the months went by. It was not fair to keep him trapped in her limited world. "Please go," she said. "Find someone who can make you happy." He left that day and she had not seen him since. She heard through old friends that he was married now to another engineer named Hana. They lived in the upper levels of the city and had 2 children. Nara was glad for him, even though it hurt to think about the life they might have had together. Her old friends from the space station tried to keep in touch at first. They would call her and ask how she was doing. They invited her to parties and gatherings, but every social event reminded her of what she had lost. Watching her friends float and dance while she sat in her chair was too painful. Gradually, she stopped answering their calls. She declined their invitations. She told them she was too busy with work, which was partly true. Eventually, they stopped trying to contact her. She understood why. It was easier for everyone if she just stayed out of their lives. The loneliness was hard sometimes. Nara would sit by her window in the evenings and watch the other Velkari flying between the buildings. They moved like birds, graceful and free. Children played games in the air, chasing each other between the floating walkways. Couples danced together in the open spaces, spinning and diving in patterns that looked like living art. She remembered what it felt like to move that way. She remembered the joy of pushing off from a surface and sailing through the air with perfect control. She remembered the feeling of the wind rushing past her as she dove down from the high buildings. Those memories were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Over the years, she had tried many different treatments. Dr. Yuna had sent her to specialists all across the galaxy. She visited the Zephyrian healers who were supposed to be able to repair any kind of nerve damage. They studied her for weeks and tried their best healing techniques, but the quantum radiation damage was beyond their abilities. She went to the ancient Celestials, who had medical knowledge that was thousands of years old. Their treatments were painful and strange, involving energy fields and meditation techniques that she did not understand. But after months of treatment, her legs were still numb and useless. The Corvin Empire had new experimental treatments that used tiny machines to repair damaged cells. Nara spent her life savings to travel to their medical centers and try their procedures. The machines worked well on normal injuries, but they could not fix the quantum scarring in her nerves. Each failed treatment made her hope a little less. Each time a new doctor told her that her case was hopeless, she felt a part of herself die. Eventually, she stopped looking for cures. She accepted that this was her life now, and she tried to make peace with it. The galaxy had changed a lot during those 10 years. New species had joined the galactic community. There were new technologies and new discoveries almost every month. But the most interesting change was the arrival of a species called humans. Most people in the galaxy thought humans were primitive and backward. Their technology looked rough and simple compared to the elegant systems that other species used. Where the Velkari built machines that looked like works of art, humans built machines that looked like they were held together with metal tape and hope. The Galactic Council allowed humans to join the community, but only barely. Many species thought it was a mistake. Humans did not live very long compared to most galactic citizens. They were not very strong or fast. Their medicine was crude, using mechanical replacements instead of biological healing. Most species saw them as an interesting curiosity at best. Nara heard about humans through her work. Some of the younger species had started hiring human engineers to work on their projects. The humans were cheap to hire, and they sometimes came up with solutions that other species had not thought of. But their methods were often considered ugly or inelegant. She did not pay much attention to the humans at first. She was too focused on her own problems to care about some new species that most people thought was primitive. But she started hearing more and more stories about them as time went on. Humans apparently never accepted that problems were impossible to solve. When other species said something could not be done, humans would try to do it anyway. They did not have the best technology or the most advanced science, but they had something that other species seemed to lack. They refused to give up. One day, while she was working on a particularly difficult quantum analysis, she got a message from her old supervisor at the space station. It had been 3 years since anyone from her old job had contacted her. "Hello, Nara," the message said. "I hope you are doing well. I have an unusual request. We have a human engineer working with us now as part of a cultural exchange program. His name is Minho. He has been asking questions about the accident that happened 10 years ago. He specifically asked about you. I told him that you prefer to keep to yourself now, but he seems very interested in your case for some reason. I wanted to let you know before he tries to contact you directly." Nara read the message twice. She could not understand why some random human would be interested in her accident, probably another researcher who wanted to study her case for some paper or project. She had dealt with enough of those over the years. She decided to ignore it. If this Minho person tried to contact her, she would politely decline to meet with him. She had no interest in being studied like a lab specimen again. But as the days went by, she found herself curious despite herself. What could a human possibly want with her? Their species was supposed to be primitive. What could they possibly understand about quantum radiation damage that the galaxy's best doctors had missed? She looked up information about humans on her computer. What she found was interesting, if not particularly impressive. Humans were indeed a young species with crude technology, but they had apparently spread across many planets in a very short time. They were adaptable and persistent, even if they were not very advanced. Their medical practices were particularly strange. Instead of growing new organs or repairing damaged ones like most species, humans often just replaced broken parts with mechanical versions. They put metal plates in broken bones and artificial pumps in damaged hearts. It seemed barbaric to most galactic citizens, but Nara had to admit there was something appealing about their approach. They did not wait for perfect solutions. When something was broken, they found a way to work around it. Maybe that was not such a bad philosophy. She was still thinking about this when her door chime rang one evening. She was not expecting anyone, and she rarely had visitors anymore. She thought about ignoring it, but the chime rang again. Sighing, she moved her chair to the door and opened it. Standing in the hallway was someone she had never seen before. He was clearly not Velkari. He was too short and had only 2 arms. His skin was darker than most galactic species, and his hair was black and straight. "This had to be a human. Are you Nara?" he asked in accented but understandable Velkari language. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "And you must be Minho." He smiled, and his whole face seemed to light up. "Yes, I am very happy to meet you. I have been hoping we could talk." Nara stared at the human standing in her doorway. He was shorter than most Velkari, with only 2 arms and strange clothing that looked like it was made from rough fabric. His dark eyes looked at her with what seemed like genuine interest, not the pity she usually saw in people's faces. "You want to learn about my work?" she asked, still not moving from the doorway. "Yes," Minho said eagerly. "I have been studying Velkari quantum technology, but there are things I do not understand. Your papers on quantum resonance patterns are brilliant. I have read them many times, but I still have questions." Nara was surprised. She had written those papers years ago, and only a few specialists in the galaxy even knew they existed. How had this human found them? And more importantly, how had he understood them well enough to have questions? "I do not give lessons anymore," she said. "I work alone now." "Please," Minho said. "I am not asking for lessons. I just want to discuss the work with someone who understands it. There are not many people in the galaxy who really understand quantum systems the way you do." Something in his voice made her pause. He sounded like she used to sound when she was young and excited about learning new things. It had been a long time since anyone had talked to her about her work with such enthusiasm. Against her better judgment, she moved her chair back from the doorway. "You can come in for a few minutes," she said, "but I am very busy, so this will have to be short." Minho stepped into her apartment and looked around. Her home was small but organized. The main room had her workstation with 3 large computer screens showing quantum energy patterns. Books and papers were stacked neatly on shelves along the walls. Everything was arranged so she could reach it from her chair. If he was bothered by her disability, he did not show it. He walked over to her computer screens and studied the patterns displayed there. Is this from the Andorian shipping fleet? He asked, pointing at one of the displays. Nara was impressed despite herself. The pattern was indeed from an Andorian quantum drive, but it would take an expert to recognize that just by looking at the energy signature. Yes, she said. They are having efficiency problems with their newest ships. I am trying to figure out why their quantum fields are not stable. Minho nodded and studied the patterns more carefully. The resonance frequency looks wrong here, he said, pointing to a section of the display. See how it jumps every few seconds? That usually means there is interference from something nearby. He was right. Nara had spent days analyzing those same patterns and had come to the same conclusion. But it had taken her much longer to figure it out. This human had spotted the problem in less than a minute. How do you know about quantum resonance? She asked. I studied it at human universities, he explained. But our understanding is very basic compared to what you Velkari can do. We know the theory, but we do not have the technology to build quantum drives like yours. Nara found herself curious about this strange human. She gestured for him to sit down in the chair across from her desk. What exactly do you do? She asked. I am an engineer, Minho said. I design machines and systems for different purposes. My government sent me here to learn about Velkari construction techniques. We want to improve our own technology. And what do you think of our technology so far? Minho smiled. It is amazing, but also very different from how humans approach problems. You build things that are beautiful and elegant. Everything fits together perfectly. But sometimes I think you make things more complicated than they need to be. Most Velkari would have been offended by that comment, but Nara found it interesting. What do you mean? Well, take your quantum drives, Minho said. They are incredible machines, but they require perfect conditions to work properly. The containment fields have to be exactly the right strength. The energy levels have to be precisely controlled, and all the components have to be made with incredible precision. That is what makes them work, Nara said. If any part is not perfect, the whole system fails. I understand that, Minho said, but humans would probably approach it differently. We would try to build a system that still works even when some parts are not perfect. We call it fault tolerance. Nara had never heard that term before. What do you mean by fault tolerance? It means designing things so they can handle problems, Minho explained. If one part breaks, the system keeps working with the other parts. If the conditions are not perfect, the system adapts instead of failing. This was a completely different way of thinking about engineering. Nara had been trained to make everything as perfect as possible. The idea of deliberately designing for imperfection seemed strange. Can you give me an example? She asked. Minho thought for a moment. Human hearts, he said. If a human heart gets damaged, sometimes we replace it with a mechanical one. The mechanical heart is not as good as a real heart in many ways. It does not adapt to emotions or exercise the way a real heart does, but it keeps the person alive, and that is what matters most. Nara knew about human mechanical hearts. Most galactic species thought they were crude and primitive. Why use a machine when you could grow a new biological heart that worked perfectly? But why not just grow a new heart? She asked. We do not have that technology yet, Minho admitted. But even if we did, the mechanical heart has advantages. It cannot get sick. It does not wear out as quickly as biological hearts. And if it breaks, we can fix it or replace it easily. This gave Nara something to think about. She had always assumed that biological solutions were better than mechanical ones. But maybe there were situations where mechanical solutions had their own advantages. They talked for over an hour about different approaches to engineering problems. Minho asked intelligent questions about her work, and she found herself explaining concepts that she had not discussed with anyone in years. It felt good to talk about quantum theory with someone who understood it. As they talked, Nara noticed something strange. Minho kept looking at her legs with a puzzled expression. At first she thought he was staring at her disability, which made her uncomfortable. But then she realized he was looking at her legs the way an engineer looks at a broken machine. Is something wrong? She asked finally. Minho seemed embarrassed to be caught staring. I am sorry, he said. I was just thinking about what you told me earlier about your accident. You said the quantum radiation damaged your spinal cord. Yes, Nara said coldly. The doctors have explained it many times. The radiation changed the structure of my nerve cells in ways that cannot be repaired. I believe them about the nerve damage, Minho said carefully. But I was wondering about something else. Have you ever had your neural activity measured while you try to move your legs? Nara was confused by the question. What do you mean? I mean, do the nerves in your brain still send signals to your legs when you try to move them, even if the signals cannot get through the damaged area? I do not know, Nara admitted. Why would that matter? If the signals cannot get through, what difference does it make? Minho looked excited. It might make a big difference. If your brain is still trying to send movement signals, then the problem is not with your brain. The problem is just with the connection between your brain and your legs. The doctors already know that, Nara said impatiently, but they cannot fix the connection. The quantum damage is too severe. But what if we do not try to fix the connection? Minho asked. What if we work around it instead? What do you mean, work around it? Minho stood up and started pacing around the room, which was something humans apparently did when they got excited. In human engineering, when we cannot fix something, we sometimes bypass it completely. We find another way to get the same result. Nara was getting frustrated. I do not understand what you are talking about. How can you bypass a spinal cord? Minho stopped pacing and looked at her seriously. We might be able to read the signals from your brain directly, before they reach the damaged part of your spine. Then we could send those signals to artificial legs that would move the way your brain wants them to move. The idea was so strange that Nara did not know how to respond. Artificial legs? You mean mechanical legs like the ones humans sometimes use? Yes, but more advanced, Minho said. Legs that could be controlled directly by your thoughts. It would be like having real legs, except they would be made of metal and circuits instead of flesh and bone. Nara shook her head. That is impossible. The galactic medical community has studied my case for years. If there was a way to bypass the damage, they would have found it. Maybe, Minho said. But they were probably looking for biological solutions. They were trying to heal the damage, not work around it. Sometimes you need to think about a problem in a completely different way to solve it. And you think humans could solve a problem that the best doctors in the galaxy could not solve? Nara asked sarcastically. Minho shrugged. Maybe not. But it might be worth trying. What is the worst that could happen? If it does not work, you would be no worse off than you are now. Nara wanted to dismiss the idea completely. It sounded like science fiction, not real medicine. But something about Minho's confidence made her pause. He spoke like someone who had solved impossible problems before. Even if such a thing was possible, she said slowly, it would be very expensive. And probably very dangerous. 3 weeks later, Nara found herself in a place she had never expected to be. A secret laboratory hidden in the lower levels of the city. Minho had converted an old storage room into a workshop filled with strange human machines and Velkari computer equipment. This is where the magic happens, Minho said as he showed her around the cramped space. Wires and circuits covered every surface. Half-built machines sat on tables next to piles of metal parts. It looked like organized chaos. Are you sure this is safe? Nara asked, looking at a device that was sparking and making odd noises. Probably not, Minho admitted cheerfully. But the best discoveries usually happen in unsafe places. He had brought a friend to help with the project. Her name was Soman, and she was another human engineer. She was smaller than Minho, with short black hair and hands that were always covered in grease from working with machines. I specialize in robotics and prosthetic devices, Soman explained when they first met. I have been working on artificial limbs for humans who lost arms or legs in accidents. But nothing as complex as what Minho wants to try with you. The first step was measuring Nara's brain activity. Minho had brought a human device called a neural scanner that looked nothing like the elegant medical equipment she was used to. It was a metal helmet connected to a box full of blinking lights. This is much simpler than Velkari brain scanners, Minho explained as he adjusted the helmet on her head. But sometimes simple is better. We are not trying to see everything that happens in your brain. We just want to detect the signals you send when you try to move your legs. Nara closed her eyes and concentrated on moving her right leg. She had done this exercise thousands of times over the years, always hoping that someday she might feel something. As usual, nothing happened. Her leg remained still and numb. But the human machine detected something that Velkari equipment had missed. The scanner's lights flashed and beeped as Minho studied the readings on his computer screen. There, he said excitedly. Do you see that? Your brain is definitely sending movement signals. They are weak and scattered because of the quantum damage, but they are there. Soman looked at the patterns on the screen. The signals are very noisy, she said. It will be hard to figure out exactly what movements you are trying to make. But not impossible, Minho insisted. We just need to build a system that can learn to understand the signals over time. The next few weeks were filled with experiments and failures. They tried different ways of reading Nara's brain signals. They built simple test devices that could move in response to her thoughts. Most of the time, nothing worked correctly. The first prosthetic leg they built was a disaster. It was made from metal and plastic parts that Soman had borrowed from her robotics lab. When Nara tried to control it with her thoughts, it moved randomly in all directions. At one point, it kicked a hole in the laboratory wall. "Well," Minho said as they looked at the damaged wall, "at least we know the leg is strong enough." "This is hopeless," Nara said after their 10th failed attempt. "My brain signals are too damaged for any machine to understand." But the humans refused to give up. They kept trying different approaches, learning from each failure. Soman built new legs with better motors and stronger joints. Minho improved the computer programs that translated brain signals into movement commands. The breakthrough came when they stopped trying to make the system perfect. Instead of trying to understand every detail of Nara's brain signals, they built a system that could learn and adapt over time. "Think of it like learning a new language," Minho explained. "At first, we do not understand what your brain is saying. But if you keep trying to move and we keep watching the signals, eventually the computer will start to recognize patterns." The new prosthetic legs looked strange compared to elegant Velkari technology. They were made from human materials and had visible joints and motors. They did not look beautiful, but they were designed to be practical and durable. Dr. Yuna discovered their secret project when she came to check on Nara during a routine visit. She was shocked to find her former patient strapped into a mechanical device in an illegal laboratory. "What is this?" she demanded, looking at the prosthetic legs with horror. "These humans are experimenting on you without proper authorization." "They are trying to help me," Nara said defensively. "This is dangerous and illegal," Dr. Yuna said. "I have to report this to the medical authorities." But then she saw something that made her pause. Nara was concentrating on moving her right leg, and the mechanical leg actually moved. It was jerky and uncontrolled, but it moved in response to her thoughts. "How is this possible?" Dr. Yuna asked in wonder. "The humans think differently than we do," Nara explained. "Instead of trying to fix the damage, they are working around it." Dr. Yuna spent the next hour examining the equipment and asking questions about how it worked. As a doctor, she was fascinated by the approach even if she did not approve of the methods. "This is very crude," she said finally, "and probably very dangerous. But I have to admit, it is more progress than we have made in 10 years of traditional treatment." She agreed to keep their secret, but only if they let her monitor Nara's health during the experiments. "If I see any signs that this is harming you," she warned, "I will shut this down immediately." The learning process was slow and frustrating. The computer had to figure out what Nara's brain signals meant by watching her try thousands of different movements. Sometimes the legs would move correctly, sometimes they would do completely the wrong thing. Nara had to learn too. She had to think about moving in a new way, concentrating on simple commands instead of complex movements. "Think about taking a step forward," Soman would tell her. "Do not worry about how your leg moves. Just think about the goal." After months of practice, something amazing happened. Nara was sitting in her chair, connected to the prosthetic legs, when she thought about standing up. The legs responded smoothly, lifting her body up from the chair for the first time in over 10 years. She stood there for only a few seconds before losing her balance and sitting back down. But those few seconds changed everything. She had stood on her own feet again, even if they were mechanical feet. "I stood up," she whispered, hardly believing it herself. "I actually stood up." Minho and Somin were cheering and hugging each other. Dr. Yuna was taking medical readings and shaking her head in amazement. But Nara was focused on something else entirely. She was thinking about walking. Not just standing, but actually taking steps and moving around the room. For the first time in years, that seemed like something that might actually be possible. The legs got better as the computer learned more about her brain signals. The artificial intelligence that controlled them started to predict what she wanted to do before she even finished thinking about it. The movements became smoother and more natural, but there were still problems. The legs were heavy and tiring to use. The connection between her brain and the computer sometimes failed, leaving her frozen in place. And the whole system required a large computer that had to be carried around like luggage. "We need to make everything smaller and lighter," Soman said as she worked on a new design. "And we need backup systems in case something goes wrong." "Most importantly," Minho added, We need to make the system learn faster. Right now it takes weeks to teach the computer a new movement. We need to get that down to hours or minutes. They spent months refining the design. The legs became lighter and more responsive. The computer became smaller and more powerful. The learning algorithms became faster and smarter. The day finally came when Nara took her first real steps. She stood up from her chair, balanced on the mechanical legs, and walked across the laboratory. The movement was not perfect. The legs moved with small jerks and pauses, but she was walking under her own control. Dr. Yuna watched with tears in her eyes. "In all my years as a doctor," she said, "I have never seen anything like this. You humans have done something that our best medical technology could not do." But the real test was still to come. Walking in a laboratory was one thing. Living a normal life was something completely different. Nara would need to learn how to do everyday tasks with her new legs. She would need to go outside and interact with the world again. Most importantly, she would need to decide what to do with this second chance at life. For 10 years, she had been hiding from the world. Now she had the opportunity to rejoin it. The question was, did she have the courage to try? As she stood in the laboratory, balancing on her mechanical legs, Nara thought about the space station where she used to work. She thought about the quantum drives and the other engineers who were probably still struggling with the same problems she used to solve. Maybe it was time to go back to work. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy that being disabled did not mean being useless. And maybe it was time to prove that humans were not as primitive as everyone thought. The mechanical legs were not perfect. They were not even close to being as good as real legs. But they worked, and that was enough. Sometimes working was better than perfect. "What do you want to do now?" Minho asked as she practiced walking around the room. Nara smiled for the first time in years. "I want to fly," she said. Minho looked confused. "Fly? But the legs are only designed for walking." "Then we need to design something better," Nara said. 6 months later, Nara stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Medical Council. Her mechanical legs were hidden beneath long pants, but everyone in the room knew what she was hiding. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about the human experiment that had given a disabled Velkari the ability to walk again. The hall was enormous, with floating platforms arranged in circles around a central speaking area. Representatives from dozens of species sat in chairs that hovered in the air, looking down at her with curiosity and skepticism. She had never spoken to such a large group before, and she could feel her heart beating fast with nervousness. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's sound system. "My name is Nara, and 10 years ago I was injured in a quantum drive accident that left me unable to walk. Today I stand before you on legs that were built by human engineers." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Many of the representatives had read reports about her case, but seeing her in person was different. She looked normal from the outside, but they all knew that beneath her clothes were mechanical parts instead of flesh and bone. Dr. Yuna sat in one of the observer sections, watching proudly as her former patient spoke to the most important medical minds in the galaxy. Next to her sat Minho and Soman, looking nervous but excited. "I know that many of you consider human medicine to be primitive," Nara continued. "You see their mechanical prosthetics and artificial organs as crude substitutes for proper biological healing. I thought the same thing until these humans showed me a different way to think about medicine." She touched a control on her wrist, and the legs of her pants became transparent, revealing the mechanical limbs beneath. The audience leaned forward to get a better look at the strange human technology. "These legs are not perfect," she admitted. "They are heavy and sometimes clumsy. They require constant maintenance and occasional repairs, but they work. And sometimes working is more important than perfect." A representative from the Zephyrian delegation raised his hand. "What can these mechanical limbs do that proper medical healing cannot?" he asked. Nara smiled. "Let me show you." She walked to the center of the speaking area and closed her eyes. The mechanical legs began to change, extending and reshaping themselves. Hidden panels opened to reveal small thrusters and stabilizing fins. Within seconds, her legs had transformed into a flight system. The audience gasped as she activated the thrusters and lifted off the ground. She flew in a circle around the speaking area, moving with grace and precision that impressed even the Velkari representatives. This was not the jerky mechanical movement they had expected. This was elegant flight that rivaled what healthy Velkari could accomplish. The humans taught me that we do not have to accept the limitations. That nature gives us, she said as she landed gracefully back in the center of the hall. We can build new capabilities that go beyond what biology provides. The questions came quickly after that. Representatives wanted to know how the technology worked, whether it could be adapted for other species, and what the risks were. Nara answered each question patiently, explaining the neural interface system and the learning algorithms that made it all possible. But the most important question came from an elderly, celestial doctor who had been silent throughout her presentation. Child, she said in a voice that carried the wisdom of centuries. Do you truly believe that mechanical solutions are superior to biological healing? Nara thought carefully before answering. No, honored elder. I believe they are different tools for different problems. Sometimes biological healing is the right answer. Sometimes mechanical solutions work better. The key is being open to all possibilities instead of limiting ourselves to one approach. The presentation ended with thunderous applause. Representatives from dozens of species approached her afterward, asking for more details about the technology and whether it could help people from their own worlds. But the real triumph came 3 days later, when Nara returned to the space station where her accident had occurred. She had not been back in 10 years, and she was nervous about how her old colleagues would react to seeing her again. The station looked exactly the same as she remembered. Workers floated through the corridors, moving with the graceful ease that she had lost and thought she would never have again. But now she moved through those same corridors with a different kind of grace, powered by mechanical muscles and guided by electronic nerves. Her old supervisor, Captain Hyun, was waiting for her at the docking bay. He was one of the workers she had saved during the accident, and he had never forgotten what she had sacrificed for them. Welcome home, Nara, he said as she stepped off the transport ship. His eyes were bright with tears as he watched her walk toward him on legs that should not have been able to work. It is good to be back, she replied, and she meant it. The station felt like home in a way that her apartment never had. Word of her arrival spread quickly through the station. Workers stopped their tasks to watch as she moved through areas she had not visited in a decade. Some of them stared at her legs with fascination. Others looked at her face, amazed to see the confident woman who had replaced the broken person who had left 10 years ago. But the most emotional moment came when she reached the quantum drive section where her accident had occurred. The area had been rebuilt after the explosion, and new safety systems had been installed to prevent similar accidents. But she could still remember exactly where everything had been on that terrible day. Jinwoo was waiting for her there. Her former boyfriend had aged in the 10 years since she had seen him, and she could see gray in his hair that had not been there before. He looked nervous and uncertain, as if he was not sure how she would react to seeing him. Hello, Nara, he said quietly. You look wonderful. Thank you, she replied. I heard about your marriage and your children. I am happy for you. I want you to know, he said, I never stopped caring about you. I left because I thought it was what you wanted, not because I stopped loving you. Nara felt a pang of sadness for what might have been, but it was mixed with something else. Acceptance. I know, she said. I made you leave because I thought you deserved better than a life with someone who was broken. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. They talked for a few minutes about their lives and their work. It was not the reunion she might have imagined years ago, but it was healing in its own way. They had both moved on to different lives, and that was okay. But the real reason for her return was not to revisit the past. It was to help build the future. Captain Hyun had offered her a job as the head of a new research division that would study applications of human Valkyrie collaborative technology. We want to explore what else might be possible when our species work together, he explained as he showed her to her new laboratory. Your legs are just the beginning. What other problems might we solve by combining Valkyrie precision with human creativity? The laboratory was much larger than Minho and Somin's secret workshop, and it was filled with the most advanced equipment that both species could provide. There were Valkyrie quantum computers next to human neural interfaces. Elegant alien manufacturing systems sat beside crude but effective human tools. Minho and Somin had been hired as her research partners, and they were already working on improvements to the prosthetic design. Their goal was to make the technology available to anyone who needed it, not just wealthy individuals who could afford experimental treatments. We have received requests from over 40 species, Somin reported excitedly. Everyone wants to know if we can adapt the neural interface technology for their specific biology. And the best part, Minho added, is that each new species teaches us something different about how brains and machines can work together. Every patient makes the technology better for everyone else. Nara spent her first week back at the station getting reacquainted with her old job and learning about the new projects her team wanted to pursue. But she also spent time simply enjoying the ability to move freely through the spaces she had loved so much. On her 7th day back, she decided to test the flight capabilities of her enhanced legs in the station's main cargo bay. The area was enormous, with room for large ships to dock and unload their cargo. It was also one of the few places on the station where someone could really stretch their wings and fly. She started slowly, using the thrusters to lift herself a few meters off the ground and hover in place. Then she began to move forward, building speed as she gained confidence in the system's response to her thoughts. Soon she was flying through the cargo bay with speed and grace that amazed the workers who had stopped to watch. She performed loops and spins that would have been difficult even for a healthy Valkyrie. The mechanical legs responded to her every thought, moving with precision that exceeded what biology could provide. But the most amazing moment came when she realized she was not alone in the air. Other Valkyrie had joined her, flying alongside her mechanical wings with their natural abilities. They moved together in patterns that looked like a dance, biological and mechanical flight combining in perfect harmony. When she finally landed, she was surrounded by her colleagues and friends. They were all talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. But one voice stood out above the others.